Let's make my newest quilt pattern called Love Letters, which uses fat quarters and only fat quarters to make this gorgeous quilt top. Love Letters is a beginner-friendly quilt pattern, and depending on your quilt level and the size that you would like to make, you can complete this quilt within a day. Now I am using The Season of Tribute, Listen to Your Heart by Sharon Holland for Art Gallery Fabrics. If you would like to purchase this fabric, I will have a link down below in the description to purchase from a quilt store that I trust and personally shop at. Doing so, a small portion will help out my channel tremendously. But once you have ironed your fat quarters, you will first cut an 18-inch square. I am only cutting a few fat quarters at a time since each fat quarter isn't perfect. No fat quarter is. Then that way I can ensure that I am getting the biggest square possible to cut out. Then once your 18-inch square is cut, you will now subcut them into 9-inch squares. Each fat quarter will yield 4 9-inch squares, and you will repeat this to all of your fat quarters for the quilt size that you are making. And Love Letters is available in 5 quilt sizes: baby, throw, twin, queen, and king. Also, save your scraps because my next video will be one of the ways to use up your scraps. That way nothing gets wasted. After your fat quarters are cut, select 2 prints and 4 9-inch squares from each print. Then with whichever print that is lighter on the wrong side of the fabric, draw a 45-degree diagonal line using your ruler and mark it with some form of a fabric marking tool. I am currently using a mechanical pencil. Now once you have drawn that diagonal line, take one of each print and lay the squares directly on top of each other, right sides together, and sew a 1/4-inch seam allowance on both sides of the line you just drew. Now we are currently making 2 half square triangles per unit. Then once you have sewn a 1/4-inch seam allowance on both sides, using fabric scissors or even a rotary cutter, cut on the line you just drew. That way we can complete our half square triangles by ironing them open. And doing so, you will be making a total of 8 half square triangles currently. Next, you will start by taking 4 half square triangles and placing them like so to form your quilt block. Then sew your blocks together to complete the envelope quilt block. Then finally, you will have 4 more half square triangles, which you can either recreate the same print style block twice, or you can create the inverse of the print of the block that I just did. Now all you're going to do is repeat these steps as many times as the pattern states until you have the amount needed for the quilt size that you are making. Now since this quilt pattern is set on point, we must create setting triangles. Using the chart within the quilt pattern, you will select a few quilt blocks and you're going to cut them in half vertically, which will be the quilt's right and left sides. Then you'll choose a few more quilt blocks and at this time cut them in half horizontally, which will be the top and bottom of your quilt top. But before someone yells at me in the comments, technically, yes, this does mean your setting triangles will be a tad smaller. Still, as many as you all know, I am a huge fan of very little waste, and we will just ignore that 1/4 inch, and we're still going to piece it together like normal. Then at the end, you will have these little dog ears to trim off, either before or after you have your quilt quilted. But moving forward, let's go ahead and start creating the quilt top. Since we are piecing this quilt on point, this means that we will be piecing our blocks on the diagonal. Now, since the envelope quilt block is relatively large, I will do my best to help show you all. But first, you will need a half block that was cut vertically and a half block that was cut horizontally. You're going to sew those two together with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Then for your next row, you will start with a half block that was cut vertically again, followed by 2 full blocks and ending in a half block that was cut horizontally. Now when you sew your diagonal rows together, this is where the tiny dog ears will come into play on the sides of your quilt. Now to avoid stretching, since once again this is a tad smaller, you can pin where your full blocks line up, with the half blocks in the center, and then go ahead and sew your diagonal rows together. And once again, this will leave that tiny dog ear, and you can either trim them off before or after your quilt is quilted. And here is what my quilt top looks like finished. I went with the king size version because Valentine's Day is one of my favorite holidays, and February is also my husband and I's anniversary. Now, I am going to go ahead and use the fabric Cloak and Petal from this collection for the backing. And as for the thread choice, I wanted to quilt it with a gold color thread. Now, I was debating back and forth between these four colors, and I ended up deciding to go with Glide Thread in Honey Gold because it was a happy medium. Not too light to blend in with the lighter fabrics, and not too dark to blend in with the darker prints. And here is what my quilt looks like all completed. And I ended up going with a new edge-to-edge quilt pattern I designed, Roses. And if you would like to make my newest quilt pattern called Love Letters, a link for the PDF pattern will be down below in the description. And if you could please take a moment to hit that like and subscribe button, hit that notification bell so you can be notified for your next amazing quilt project.